Recording.
I want to welcome everyone to Solarize nonprofit partnership model for capitalistic philanthropy. I'm your moderator, Michael Smith, and I'm here with guests April Price of Community Environmental Council, Matt Riley of Asteri Solar. Welcome. I'm Michael Smith, general partner at Regeneration.VC. We're a venture capital firm focused on accelerating the transition to a circular economy. I'm also a board member of Sustainable Change Alliance Foundation. Sustainable Change Alliance is an impact-oriented, member-based, not-for-profit educational group. We are focused on impact investing, which we define as bringing financial and other resources to double and triple bottom line organizations that are trying to address big social, environmental, or health-related issues, and trying to do that in a sustainable manner. Some of those organizations are for-profit, some are nonprofit, and some come from the independent sector. I'd like to acknowledge the hardworking and dedicated SCA board members in the meeting, and gratitude for all of the members who have joined the call. Finally, we couldn't do any of this without our sponsors, including founding sponsors, Argyle Capital Partners, Impact Family Office, Maps.com, Solgenics, and yes, our platinum sponsors, Nixon Peabody Law Firm, and our silver sponsor, Brashears Insurance. If you're not yet a member of Sustainable Change Alliance Foundation, we encourage you or your organization to join us on this journey. Visit sustainablechangealliance.org where you can sign up as a member. A few final logistics and then we can get the show on the road. This meeting's being recorded. Everyone's on mute except for our guest speakers and myself. The chat room is how we'll be taking questions for our guests, and we'll be addressing these questions towards the end of the program. So with that, I'd like to introduce both April and Matt. April Price, she works at the Community Environmental Council and is focused on transitioning the Tri-County region to renewable energy sources and reduced energy consumption. She leads CEC's Solarize program, which facilitates residential solar adoption. April holds a master's degree in environmental science and management with a specialization in economics and politics of the environment from the Bren School at University of California, Santa Barbara. And we have Matt Riley of Asteri Solar. Matt is a graduate of the Bren School of Environmental Science and is the founder of Infinity Renewables, a Southern California headquartered leader in wind development. Infinity Renewables was acquired by Engie, a leader in global energy, in early 2018. Matt is a passionate environmentalist, dedicating his career to renewable energy to combat climate change. So let's get started. Matt and April, thanks for joining us today and filling us in on this exciting program.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
So we thought it might be best, given the nuance and exciting nature of the program, to start with a few slides on what it is Solarize is about. So with that, could we pull up the deck, Stephen?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and pull it up.
Oh, it's in you, April?
Yeah. Okay. All right, and should I just launch in here, Michael?
Please do.
Okay, so yeah, thank you again for having me. I'm really excited to speak to our Solarize nonprofit program, which at its core is a partnership that is focused on supporting local nonprofits in going solar. And the partnership is really what I would like to stress during this conversation. As you introduced, we have a few different players. We have the Community Environmental Council, where I work. We have Asteri Solar, which is Matt's organization. And then we have the local nonprofits that we want to serve. And so it's really an effort of both of our organizations coming together that makes this possible. So at the real basics here are we're talking to nonprofits that have goals of reducing their energy costs and improving their environmental sustainability. So they want to go solar, but it's an expensive proposition to do so. So through our program, Asteri Solar is able to purchase solar systems for regional nonprofit organizations. Then these organizations agree to purchase all of the energy that those solar systems generate for a period of 5 years. After those 5 years, the nonprofits are able to purchase the systems at fair market value. And really it's at that point that the savings begin. So once they own the system, the nonprofits receive decades of free energy and their electricity expenses drop significantly. So this model that we're following for the Solarize nonprofit program isn't novel in itself. It's something called a power purchase agreement, or a PPA. But the difference in what we're offering here, there's two key things. First of all, we're able to offer these short-term agreements so that the nonprofits can become the owners of the system after a fairly short period of time. PPAs are available on the open market for a variety of solar projects, but the terms are typically in the 20 or 25 year range. So under that kind of scenario, the nonprofit continues to buy their solar energy from a third party, which works out great for some folks. But if you're really looking to save a lot of money, then being the owner of your own solar system is the way to go. Another key difference in what this program provides versus what's available kind of just on the open market is these power purchase agreements are often available for large solar projects, but Asteri Solar, and through this program, is willing to finance projects for much smaller systems. So it's really a great way to help a nonprofit go solar that wants to take this step but doesn't have the upfront capital to invest in a system. So just walking you through what we've done through this program. Again, it's quite a partnership in that we have our capital coming from Asteri Solar, and we have sort of this educational and outreach piece coming from the Community Environmental Council. And utilizing those two partners, we've been able to help 8 nonprofits add solar to their facilities and resulted in 250 kilowatts of renewable energy added to our community. So a couple little quick pictures here. This was our first project, the Bicycle Coalition. So it was a small project. You'll notice in all of these slides, there's local solar companies listed. That's been another element of our program working together. We've been able to partner with local solar companies to actually install these systems. So we had the Bicycle Coalition as, again, our first project when we launched our pilot program in 2019. Then we moved over and I worked with the Santa Maria campus Boys and Girls Club of the Central Coast, and that was installed by California Solar Electric. This was a really fun one, Girls Inc. in Carpinteria. Neat to see the girls really get excited about the solar there. And this one I get to see whenever I ride my bike past the wharf, the Santa Barbara Natural History Museum's Sea Center. And another one that's pretty visible in our community is the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission. We also have and the Santa Barbara Middle School we just finished. We also have a couple of projects that we're just wrapping up. So the Wildling Museum is installed in Solvang currently, and then we're finishing up Planned Parenthood in San Luis Obispo. So really the idea here is to get solar on these facilities with no upfront cost, and then to allow these facilities to save money. So each of these nonprofits has definitely a range in how much money they're saving by adding solar to their facilities, but we're in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $300,000 for the life of the project. So it's exciting to me to see these savings being reinvested into the programs that these nonprofits are already offering to the community. So that's kind of the general way that the program works. From my role at the Community Environmental Council, we've been established in the community for 50 years. And so we have a lot of relationships with nonprofits and a lot of experience in the solar industry, as you mentioned. I've run a program to help homeowners go solar for the last 5 years. And so in doing so, we really, again, gained this, this experience and connections to help folks go solar. So yeah, I talk to nonprofits in the community, help gather bids from local solar companies, and then through a as seamless as possible transition, we're able to finance those through Asteri Solar and get solar on the roof. So there's the real gist of the program.
Great, so maybe I'll take it from here then, Michael, and talk about from my side of things. So share my side here. Okay. So what April just walked through was the CEC side of it and the basics of the program. As Michael mentioned, I'm Matt Riley. I'm representing Asteri Solar here, which is really just was my wife and I, and or is my wife and I. This is an endeavor that we launched several years ago, and we feel like the partnership with the CEC has been amazing. I mean, April just walked through for everybody what they're doing for this program, but I think we'll get into a little bit more detail on this as we go along. But they're doing so much advocacy work in the community to help organizations, not just nonprofits, achieve their sustainability objectives. And what we were lacking in this particular space is that these tax credits really drive solar. It always has been like that for residential or even the grid scale stuff like you see behind me. Tax credits really drive the ability to deploy solar at scale. And of course, nonprofits kind of fall through the cracks on that. They don't pay taxes, so there's no taxable income. So therefore, if they put solar on their facilities and pay for it, they cannot use the investment tax credit or any of the tax depreciation benefits. And so often that becomes enough of a barrier where they don't do it. So we had talked with the CEC, we can get into sort of how we put the program together, but from my perspective, what I loved about this whole idea was a couple of things. First of all, I just loved the fact that as an impact investor, I could go to an organization like the CEC and just think creatively about how to solve a problem. And I think if everybody could leave here with just one theme out of this discussion, I just like everybody to see that relationship can be incredibly powerful. And so in this case, we looked at this and said, look, we're active in the philanthropic world. And we like to grant money to various organizations. We feel very good about that. We participate on boards. We do lots of things. But what this allowed us to do was to put capital at work, solve a problem, and have what Michael just referred to as double and triple bottom line results. That's what came out of this. And actually sustainable results too, which is just great. So when I just made up a term called capitalistic philanthropy. It's just a way for us to deploy capital, realize a rate of return, and then in this case, it becomes a long-term savings for the organization. And actually, so my dollar that went into that organization, actually, not only did I get my dollar back, maybe I got $1.05 or something like that, you know, some rate of return. But then that nonprofit then after 5 years then saves, you know, 10 cents every year. You know, I have the some of the numbers here. So for every $100,000 invested, not only is there a market return, but for the investor, but also the nonprofit meets its sustainability objectives, which of course most nonprofits have sustainability objectives, so it helps them meet those goals. And then I think what the best part of this is, once they own the system in year 6, they then get all of the benefit of just solar producing on their rooftop, and they just don't pay for that electricity anymore. So for a project of that size of $100,000, this is just an example, they would save probably on average $10,000 per year, roughly. And when we talk to nonprofits about this, they literally think this is the greatest thing ever. I mean, and many of them, some of the largest ones, and I remember talking with someone from the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission, asking them, "Hey, look, is this really impactful?" And their savings, they said, "Look, that's oftentimes the difference of us being in the red or the black in that given year, or allows us to do some program that we wouldn't normally have done." And so they have that guaranteed savings for years 6 to 40 or beyond, or however long the solar panels last. And then the last thing is we do use local solar installers, so we have a local economic development benefit to the local installer base and therefore employees. So the results of the program have been, those are, you know, you've seen some of these pictures already, but the results of the program are, you know, kind of speak for themselves a little bit in just this initial phase. And this is just really April and I just kind of getting going with one impact investor, is Asteri Solar, and April getting the program up and launched and doing a lot of the advocacy with nonprofits in town. And we've just scratched the surface. So we've done 250 kilowatts, those 8 projects. It's about $865,000 invested. And when those nonprofits own their systems in year 6, there's a projected savings of $70,000, and that escalates per year. And they'll, you know, depending on when their system started, they'll, you know, 6-year term, you know, staggers a little bit. But in my opinion, you know, at that point, the effort that we put into this, that's the benefit. That these, now there's this amount of savings that happens almost in perpetuity, probably in my lifetime, that will occur because we put the effort in up front. And that's just incredibly exciting for us. And it's really one of the reasons why we wanted to go and do this. But I will say that this program would not exist without the CEC at all. There's no way I could do this without the CEC. And I think the reverse is true, where the CEC really needed someone like Asteri Solar to come in and say, "Hey, look, I think I've got the key to unlock this problem we have with not being able to get solar onto the roofs of nonprofits." So I'll pause there, Michael, and maybe we can.
Yep. Let's come off the screen share if we could. Yep. Such an exciting program that is having real world positive impact and implications. And I can tell from our chat, we have a whole host of really solid questions on board, and I have some as well in terms of the specifics of the program. But before we get too deep into it, I'd love to know from both of you, April, if you could start just your background, your origin story, why you get excited about this particular issue of all the other environmental challenges. What is it about this one that really gets you excited?
Yeah, I mean, I came to CEC as an educator and as you know, and with a background in environmental science, and you know, I launched into this program of educating homeowners, and it was exciting. It was fulfilling to help folks get solar on their roof, and in the process, you know, we got over 3 megawatts of solar installed, helped about 800 homeowners So that felt great. But at the end of the day, knowing that that was just a tiny a fraction of the built environment, and how much impact solar could have in the community was really a motivation to look beyond the solar or the residential solar industry, and to think bigger about nonprofits. Climate change is a huge driver for me in my daily life and in my work. So to be able to reduce the emissions of our local nonprofit agencies is something that really motivates me.
And Matt, same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working in renewable energy my entire career since the Bren School in 2003. And one thing I learned at the Bren School is that there are opportunities like this where you can achieve, I mean, it's really cliche to say win, 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 or triple bottom line, or all those things. But if you really look at this is an example of that. And so for me, it was, to look around at some of these for-cause nonprofits that we've selected for the program and to say, hey, we're saving them significant dollars in the long run, and we're doing that with renewable energy. That to me, it doesn't get much better than that. Now it has taken some work, and it's definitely, April and I have been at it for a little while now, and I think we've got the program really going, up and running. And I guess the next thing that would excite me is to see this scale to a point where, we've kind of scratched the surface. I think, April, you'd mentioned to me one time that I think somewhere between 300 and 500 more nonprofits could probably do this. We've done 8. So when you think about that in terms of scale, if we could take this platform and elevate it in our community, I mean, we would be having all those benefits, spread not just amongst impact investors like me, but they would also go to nonprofits, the CEC benefits, and the local jobs from the installers. So that just has really excited me.
Yeah, it's incredible to see the demand and what who's showing up with the limited set of projects that you've done so far, and the immense opportunity in front of you. It seems like it's such a win-win-win for nonprofits, for CEC, which I want to talk about, and for investors. I'm going to get to a couple questions just because there's a lot of interest, particularly on the nonprofit side. Titus's question, what happens if a nonprofit cannot afford to purchase the system?
I'm going to take that one, April.
Go for it, Matt.
Because I write the check. I get the check. So Titus, they don't pay for it. That's the best part about this program. So Asteri pays for the system, owns the system for 5 years. And because it does that, it can then be the owner of record and can capture the tax credits and the tax benefits. And so it installs the system, has a power purchase agreement where it basically sells the power generated to the nonprofit for that 5-year term. Sometimes it's been 6 years, but it's very short. And that's the IRS minimum is 5 years. I have to own it for 5 years. Those tax credits then flow through Asteri to a taxable entity, in this case, my wife and I, and we can monetize those tax credits. That allows us to have the PPA price very low. It allows us to have all the finances work out to put the equipment on the roof. So the nonprofit doesn't have to come out of pocket to put this up. They tend to basically break even for those 5 years, like what their electricity bill goes down because they're producing power on their roof. And to make up for that, they're paying their bill to Asteri. So that's basically a kind of more or less a break even, sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower. But then in year 5, when they take the system, then those savings, they don't pay Asteri anymore because Asteri is no longer involved, and those savings are just theirs to bank. So I hope that's explained in a way that folks can understand. It's a bit complicated. The whole reason around this is that somebody needs to use these tax credits. If they go unused, solar is generally not able to be deployed. And so we've found a way to essentially finance these projects in a very efficient way that gets the solar panels in the hands of the nonprofits as soon as possible, which in this case is about 5 years.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think maybe one element of the question was what would happen at the end of those 5 years if the nonprofit felt like they couldn't afford to purchase the system. But as we enter into these agreements with the nonprofits, we have these conversations, and at the end of those 5 years, these nonprofits have been paying basically towards the ownership of the system. And so it's really in the nonprofit's best interest and in Asteri's best interest to be able to come to an agreement about the fair market value of the system at that time of transfer of ownership.
And this is probably a good place to just, that's a perfect example of me explaining something very complicated, probably losing half the audience. And then April explaining in a way that makes sense to people. And so in the solar industry, you have a lot of people selling a lot of stuff, right? And this is just a very unique program. And CEC is an advocacy organization in our community. One of their mission is just to explain these kinds of things to people, like how would you create sustainability goals? How do you achieve these? What are the things you could do for your entity, your business, or your residents? And so, April and the CEC's role here is to explain a complex situation in terms that people can understand, and explain to them with really a clarity that's really amazing. And probably because April, you've done so many residential solar projects over the years, you really understand the space very well. That most of the nonprofits that have started to engage with the CEC, I think, have really found that refreshing.
Ivor's wondering about the size and scale of projects. If a church or a faith community, if something might be too small, what's the smallest project you would consider for the program?
I think the smallest project that we've completed so far was the Bicycle Coalition, and that's around 13 kW. There's definitely savings as the projects increase in size. So that just means the PPA price becomes a little bit more affordable. But correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, I don't think we have kind of a floor for how small projects we're interested in exploring.
No, in fact, like the Wilding Museum was another small one, but I mean, I just love their mission. If people don't know about the Wilding Museum, you should look it up. It's really cool. I mean, it's a museum that showcases art related to nature. And so, we just kind of had to figure out how to make that project work. And so no, there's no minimum, but the smaller you go, you lose economies of scale. Sometimes it gets a little tricky to put the system in there in an affordable way. And then there's no limit to the size on the high side, except for, maybe limitations in funding availability, which right now obviously is just limited to Asteri. But that doesn't have to be the case.
April, what would you say is one of your favorite success stories so far?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, it was so exciting to see Girls Inc. Carpentry, one of our first projects to go solar, because it's not that visible to the community, but it's really visible to the girls that are served through that organization. And in speaking to the board and the staff at the organization, they had great goals of incorporating solar education into their STEM programming, science, technology programming, and getting girls excited about going solar. So that was great. And it had significant economic savings for them as well.
How about you, Matt? What's the favorite one you've done so far?
My favorite one was the first one, because we actually did it and we kind of showed that we could do it, because it had been a couple of years in the sort of the talking mode, and we finally kind of put it together. But I will say that for Andrea, my wife and I, probably this Planned Parenthood project that we're doing in San Luis Obispo, for us, that organization, my wife's engages with Planned Parenthood in Santa Barbara a lot. And we actually tried to do it in the Santa Barbara location. But it's just nice to get one of those projects off the ground. We really wanted to support that organization.
For both of you, what would you say in terms of, from a nonprofit standpoint, is this something that they could fundraise around potentially and gather interest around within their organizations, or is it more purely just in a transactional mode?
No, I think that renewable energy is something that nonprofits fundraise for all the time. And there is still some fundraising that's required of nonprofits in participating in this program, either if their energy bills increase or just to plan ahead for that fair market value purchase at the end of year 5. But yeah, this has been a real rally call to, I think, boards and donors in the community to support this work.
Yeah, and what April's referring to there is that initially I had hoped that I could give the system to the nonprofit at the end of the term. And according to IRS rules, I am not allowed. I have to sell it to them at fair market value, which is a very fungible thing. How that's determined, it can be fairly low. But so if there is and it's usually a fraction of the original cost, right? It's not anything close to the original cost. But you know, if that is a payment that needs to be made at the end, then, you know, there can be some fundraising around that. I just love the fact that people can use this as a you know, nonprofits can say, look, we're doing something about our sustainability objectives. You know, we're putting solar on our roof. We're going to see some savings from this. And I think that that's really important, especially, you know, in today's environment when we're really trying to combat climate change. Even if an organization, that's not their specific mission, I think almost every organization understands that they have to do something on that front. And if achieving that by putting solar panels on their roof, you know, add something to their next newsletter that allows for a little bit of fundraising, that's fantastic. I mean, that's another, I mean, what are we at? Quadruple, what's the fifth one? A quintuple, or I don't know where we're headed, but that's just another benefit that, you know, it's not something that I participate in at all, but if they can show to their stakeholders that they're achieving those sustainability objectives, then great.
Absolutely. And I love seeing that in areas outside of environmental nonprofit focus. Question from Stephen on more on the offensive strategy side. Can a nonprofit put in more capacity than it needs or consumes and sell the excess to SCE to create a revenue stream for the organization?
Great question. Unfortunately, the way that our utilities regulate solar, that's not a possibility through this program or outside of this program, really. You can basically offset about 100% of your usage and plan for a little bit more. You know, if you're going to add electric car charging stations or make some improvements to your facility, you can add a little bit more solar, but you can't, unfortunately, plan to make any money off of selling the excess back to the grid.
Question from Laura as it relates to the CEC. Do you receive funding, April, in support for the work that you're doing, or is there a different way that the CEC gets compensated?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Laura. The CEC does receive, I'll call it a referral fee for each of the projects that moves forward. And so definitely it's been a process in exploring this as a pilot program and how we can make this sustainable for CEC to spend a decent amount of time talking to nonprofits in the community. And I've talked to a good number of nonprofits that weren't ready to take this step. So, you know, we don't get paid, you can say, for all of the time spent talking to nonprofits. But yeah, I think we've come up with a way to make this sustainable for CEC for each project that moves forward, we do receive a payment.
Yeah, and I would say that that is incredibly important to me as well, not only to support CEC, because I love that organization. And I think if there was a CEC in every city in the United States, we'd be a lot better off. So, for them to perform this advocacy work, to do a lot of the hard work to educate our community on the importance of renewable energy, I really wanted to make sure that there was a benefit there for the CEC as well, so we can stay engaged over the long term as we build more and more solar out.
What's the goal? And this came up in other questions in the chat as well. Is there a set target of deployment that you're hoping to get to in terms of number of projects and time, or is it what comes through in the next couple of years that fits your kind of mandate? How do you think about goals?
I think Matt and I, excuse me, are comfortable sharing a nice round number of a megawatt goal here, but I'll push a little bit more and say if Matt's ready to work with other investors, we're happy to go a little bit beyond that goal. Just thinking back to how we got started on this program and how we prioritize nonprofits as the place where CEC wanted to work, we noticed that there wasn't a lot of work being done in commercial solar in general. And ultimately that's because locally, a lot of our commercial properties are not owner occupied. And as many of us are aware, there's a high per capita number of nonprofits in our region. And so surprisingly, perhaps a lot of these agencies are owner occupied. So they have more of an incentive to invest in going solar. So as Matt alluded to earlier, there's a lot of opportunity locally. We've done projects in Santa Barbara County and San Luis Obispo County, and we're beginning to talk to some organizations in Ventura County, but we might be interested in expanding beyond the Tri-County region. And I would really just think there's so much opportunity here, but a megawatt to answer your question.
Yeah, and I think our little origin story here with our pilot program is really just the reason why it's a single investor right now is because I kind of wanted to see if we could do it. And I didn't really want to involve other people because if for some reason I tripped up or we had an issue with monetizing the tax credits the way we were trying to do it, or we had some issue with the program, I wanted to vet that out and have that issue be my issue to resolve and it's been a couple of years now. We've got a lot of projects under our belt and we've proved out the model. And I think at this point, this is really one of our first conversations, frankly, where I've been willing to kind of branch out and say, look, let's do this. We're ready to do it. April's been asking me to do this for a while and really bring more people into the tent. And so, if we do that, frankly, a megawatt is perfectly achievable within a very short period of time. But like I said, there's 300 to 500 nonprofits out there that potentially could do this. And just a few weeks ago, we had an extension of the tax credits through a tax extenders bill at the federal level that gave us even a longer runway for this. So now we really have out to 2026, frankly, with the tax credit that's in place. With some safe harbor mechanisms. And so that gives us a really nice big chunk of time. We've got 5 years and we could probably knock out a few megawatts if we really wanted to, if people really got energized about it. So I would like to see it scale as much as we could possibly do in our community.
Yeah, for the impact investors on now and within SCA and our network and in the chat room, there's questions about how to get involved with this effort, whether that be from an investment, philanthropic, or other. Is there anything yet set up that one could invest alongside or into, or do these have to be created in a bespoke way? How can some of the SCA community get involved or others in the community?
I'd say we have probably about 80% of the infrastructure needed. I mean, we have some great people around town that have been helping me out. Janet Ames from Blue Isle is on the phone here. Bradley Hollister, Hollister Law Office, and Robert Vanier from Bertie Speckler's our lawyer and CPA. So we have some infrastructure we've been using, the folks that understand the program really, really well. And I think all we have to do is figure out, what is the right mechanism to add people into the tent. I don't think that's going to be very complicated, Michael, to be honest. It could be one-offs, it could be a larger pool. And I think we just haven't taken that next step. I think we're ready to take that next step. And frankly, I'm really excited about it. So how we do that, I think, anyone after this can follow up with me or April and express interest, or through the SCA. I think that's probably a great way to do it. And I'll probably start to assemble like-minded people that have an interest in this, and start to have conversations with people about what this looks like and how they might be involved.
That's incredibly exciting stuff. We're going to get.
And I see Laura is in. Oh, sorry, Laura. That was a direct message. My bad. I just outed you. I'm glad you're interested. Thank you.
So we're going to get into the weeds with Mr. Gardner. He's curious about the underwriting decision process at Asteri. At banks, the credit committee deliberates over a long period of time whether to make a loan. The same thing happens with the IC, the private equity shop. Asteri is one couple making a decision. How do you do that? How do you assess the counterpart risk of these nonprofits? How long is your typical decision process?
It's a great question. So the short answer is that this is probably one of the most important parts of what we're doing. So in a normal world, a nonprofit might get approached by a solar company that wants to do a 30-year PPA and maybe show them 5% savings or something like that, some marginal savings on their electricity bill over 30 years. This means that some other company is going to own solar equipment on their roof for 30 years. And then there's a whole credit analysis that goes into that to see who's going to own that building for 30 years. And are they going to pay this bill for 30 years? Then it gets very complicated and often becomes an impediment, because when you look at the financials of a nonprofit, I think a lot of people here are either part of a nonprofit or on a board of a nonprofit. Everybody knows that it sort of balances out at the end of the year. It's not designed, the financials aren't necessarily designed to look great from the perspective of a bank like a JP Morgan or a Bank of America or somebody like that. So the reason why this works so well for us is that we have to take a very short-term view on this. We have to take a view of, will this nonprofit be there for 5 years? And then, what are our protections in our documents, even if they aren't there within the next 5 years? And frankly, most of the return of the investment is through the investment tax credit and the depreciation tax advantage, which means that the minute we install the equipment, we will receive a large part of the investment back in that first year. So yes, we want to make sure that the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission or Boys and Girls Club of Santa Maria or a church or a school is going to be there for 5 years, but we can take a practical view on that. We don't have to take a banker's view on that and really hold their feet to the fire and make the process frankly impossible, which is really sort of tends to be how it ends up. And I think for those folks that looked into it, if they're part of a nonprofit and they've had this conversation with people, they've probably felt that already. That became an impediment. Boy, I wish our financials looked stronger. Well, of course, I hope they don't. I hope you're using the money for the mission that you're supposed to be using it for, right? So just a long-winded way of saying, Jonathan, that we can take a practical position because of the term and also because of how the return profile is. It's so front-loaded that if this were 30 years and we were adding debt to the investment, things like that, we would be a very different mindset. And I think that doesn't have to be 5 years. That could be 7 or 8 or something like, that shorter duration than what the typical industry contract would look like if you were a nonprofit, say, going and talking to a Sun Run or a Solar City or someone like that. This is their business.
So just one final housekeeping note. We have a members and sponsors only event starting at 2 p.m. So we're going to talk for a few more minutes. We got a lot of stuff to cover and awesome questions in the chat. We also, of course, encourage non-members to join so they can get access. We encourage non-members to join SCA so that they can get access to these things. That's my plug. The after event is where people get a little more personal about motivations, making connections, and so on. Back to the program. So great question from Matthew Stotts about the work you are doing. The impact is clear and lasting. Thank you, April and Matt. That said, are there other impactful infrastructure related projects besides solar, weatherizing, et cetera, that are possible or already exist that might benefit from a unique program like the one that you're doing with solar?
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's kind of a lesson that I've learned in this partnership with Matt, that things that I didn't know were possible before are possible when talking to interested, motivated investors in town. And CEC runs a number of programs. We run programs to help people swap over to clean transportation, a sustainable food system, ditching single-use plastic. So these are all areas where I'm happy to have these conversations, and other members of CEC staff. You know, we're kind of this small, flexible team of people that want to make lasting impact in the community. So absolutely open to these ideas.
Yeah, let me take that question in a slightly different direction, Michael. I mean, yeah, absolutely. The CEC is obviously showing that it is capable of having those conversations at a level that, you know, probably is a very high level. You know, but I'd like to encourage everyone, if you're related to a nonprofit or you're more on the impact investment side, don't be afraid to engage on an issue that matters to you. And I think, you know, if you're an impact investor, find the nonprofit that's doing the thing that is advocating for the thing that you want to try to solve. Talk to them about where are the pain points? How can you solve this? Go maybe think a little bit more creatively, although don't get me wrong, I think that grants are very important. I think that funding source is incredibly important, but let's think creatively about engagement. And I think that there are a lot of people out there like me that, given the opportunity, would love to engage at a level that's just different than I would engage normally. And so, you know, April and Sigrid over there at the CEC, like, they gave me the elbow room to kind of talk creatively with them about how can we have a private individual, or, you know, a private investor relationship with the CEC on a specific topic. And I would encourage you to do that, because you might find that you can solve a problem like this and have benefits all the way around.
So I think it's pretty clear to everyone on the Zoom today that there's a new administration in DC with a slightly different approach to climate-related issues, and a number of different executive orders and such related to these topics. How do you think the new administration might play a role to affect the program or change the incentives in some way for renewables in general for Santa Barbara, and directly as it relates to what you're doing?
Yeah, Matt already brought up the extension of the federal tax credit. I mean, that happened before the change of the administration, but that will definitely impact the marketability of the return on our projects. A similar increase in a tax credit would also be fantastic. I'll pass it back to Matt to speak to other federal drivers there. But I also expect state drivers to significantly increase opportunities here. I know that there's been a number of questions that have come up regarding energy storage being added to these projects. And there was already a round of incentives, state incentives, to significantly bring down the cost of solar paired energy storage projects. Those incentives, as you can imagine, were snatched up very quickly in most cases. But as these incentives continue to roll out, and we prepare ourselves to take advantage of them, I see great opportunity to roll them out and to get more storage and solar online.
Yeah, I think that actually renewables did pretty well overall during the Trump administration. It wasn't a full stop, but obviously with the Biden administration, today's announcements actually, I mean, I don't know if anybody has CNN on today, but it's all climate all day long. And it's great. A lot of support for climate science, R&D, anything that can get us moving. And they want to have a carbon neutral grid by 2035. Okay, well, you don't do that by putting obstacles in the way. So whatever obstacles are in the way, there will be a major effort to remove them. And so I'm excited to just see what that means. I do think that grid resiliency, pairing batteries with storage, that's going to be a theme for the next several years. We're going to see that all over the place. We already are. I mean, Greg talked about the Santa Barbara School District doing its microgrid projects. So we're going to see a lot of that. I think that one of the things that we'll probably see less of is utilities pushing against renewable. I mean, they've always kind of pushed against renewables a little bit and also encouraged them in other ways. But I do think that we will see a little less advocacy. You know, they'll be a little less successful now. I mean, I think that there's going to be an environment where, look, it's coming on, and we have to bring as much solar, wind, battery storage, you know, you name it, non-carbon energy sources along. And I think that this focus on distributed energy, which is for those that, you know, non-centralized, you know, non-power plants, the stuff that I've built in my other job, my day job, centralized power plants. I do think that this reliance, the opposite of that, which is the reliance on distributed energy, which is rooftop solar, batteries in your garage. I think that's only gonna, I think that market is just poised to explode. And as pricing comes down, as costs come down, and it becomes even more economic to do this, then what we saw on the grid scale side, on the centralized, when that happened, all of a sudden we were building, you know, 10 gigawatts a year wind energy, and same with solar. So I expect, I mean, we've gone through some waves on distributed solar in the past, but I think it's just only going to pick up as costs continue to decline. As we try to meet that 2035 goal.
Exciting question from Laura in that, is this a model that could be used in other communities? Can it be scaled? Can you put this together in a way that, you know, you could bring to or allow other organizations to handle, or is this very much unique to Santa Barbara?
No, this absolutely can be scaled. And in fact, I think other organizations are doing this. I haven't taken the, you know, I did have a day job for a long time, so I didn't have a chance to really dive deep into that. I did a little exploration. I know that nonprofits doing this and monetize and getting some structure to monetize the tax credits is a challenge across the United States. So it is a problem that needs to be fixed, which means it's an opportunity to be fixed for the foreseeable future. So we wanted to kind of start in Santa Barbara, move to the Tri-Counties, which is kind of where CEC plays. But if we were to move beyond that, I would say that role that CEC has about advocacy and education needs to be there as well. So there needs to be a fundamental partner in that to get outside of the Tri-Counties area, even outside of California. You really need that. You absolutely need that.
Yeah, and I'll just add, there definitely are other organizations that are doing this, and I agree with what you said, Matt.
One of our final questions from Dennis, one of my favorites here in the chat. For Spanish tile roofs, particularly over 3 stories tall, how do you install those solar panels without damaging the roof?
Well, it's a little bit more of an expensive and time-intensive project. The solar tiles or the Spanish tiles are removed in the section of the area where you want to add the solar panels. A composite shingle is laid down where you've removed the Spanish tiles, and then the solar panels are installed on top of that composite roof.
Final question, just about Titus, about the investment tax credits. What happens to investment tax credits at the end of the program?
The owner of the solar project takes those tax credits and puts them against other income. So in this case, that's me. So it requires a certain type of investor that has passive income streams that they can use to monetize the tax credit and the depreciation benefits. Again, that's kind of the meat and potatoes around this stuff, which I'm happy to follow up with people on and how that works. But this is the point. The nonprofit can't use that tax credit, and so therefore the investor has to use it and then bake that benefit back into the power price that is being paid and the term being so short. So that's kind of how that circular loop is supposed to play out.
Excellent. Well, this has been a really amazing discussion. Matt and April, the work is inspiring. I think you could tell from the questions that came in. We're all excited to have this happening in our community. We need to have more nonprofits signing up for this. So hopefully everyone could do their part in letting those know that don't have solar yet, that this exists. And we are really grateful for the time. As I'd mentioned earlier, we have a members and sponsor event that's starting in a separate Zoom link that you will have received. If you have yet to sign up for SCA, please join us so you can come over for more events and special programming like that. Thanks again, everyone, for joining today, and stay dry.